Welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Podcast. This podcast reflects on the work, money, and the lives of blue-collar business owners. Blue Collar Wealth expert Darryl Smith discusses the day-to-day obstacles blue-collar business owners face as they pursue a better life, career, and wealth. And now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to episode number 6, the CRA gift to blue-collar business owners you probably don't know about. All right, Darryl, let's start unpacking this and breaking this down. What is this CRA gift that you're referring to?
For over 30 years, the Canada Revenue Agency has allowed business owners to the ability to pay for both their families, their own health, and their employees' health by using healthcare by using pre-tax dollars, corporate dollars, and effectively it saves about 35% if a business owner had to pay for it with after-tax dollars.
Well, that's a humongous savings. So how many people are you running into that are using this?
You know, it's surprising. It's been around for a very long period of time, but very few people really know about it. And I think the reason is that it requires a basic understanding of it first and foremost, but also there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of accountants out there that I actually met with a number of them, and there's a number of them, they think that the administration costs in that are extremely high, and they're not, and they think they're difficult or complex to set up. They're not. They're actually very easy to set up. Reporting and everything else is done by a third-party administrator. So, you know, it's not that difficult of a process. It really takes about 20 minutes to set these up.
Oh, my gosh. Well, does your business have to be incorporated in order for this to apply?
No, actually, there are two types of plans under Canada Revenue Agency's guidelines. There's what's for incorporated businesses. It's called the Health and Welfare Trust. And for non-incorporated businesses, it's referred to as a private health services plan. But both are commonly referred to as a health spending account or even a health care spending account, but mostly health spending account.
What are the particulars of these? I'm sorry. Can you give us a little bit more of a particular between the differences between incorporated versus non-incorporated, please?
For the most part, they're identical. The real differences are in contribution amounts. With incorporated businesses, there's no set maximum. It's really deemed as what would be reasonable. And for non-incorporated businesses, it's $1,500 per year per adult and $750 per year per child. So there are some slight differences with that, and as well with not only contribution amounts, but also rollover provisions, and we can kind of get into that a little bit later.
Okay, well, can you explain just a little bit more about how these work from a fundamental standpoint, please?
Sure. It requires a third-party administrator, and what that person does, they'll set up a special healthcare bank account. So it is a physical bank account held in trust for the company. Deposits are made on a regular basis from the employer to this healthcare bank account, and so the employer's job is really just to set up the contribution amounts per the employees. The employee goes to the dentist. You know, they have a bill. They pay the dentist. They submit the claim, and once the claim has been submitted to the third-party administrator, because with Privacy Act, your employer really can't know where you're spending your money, which is a good thing. But once the claim's been submitted and approved, the money gets directly deposited to the employee's bank account, and it all happens pretty quick.
Now, I hate using this word because it's so controversial, at least from how you and I run our own lives, but what are the fees and costs associated with this? I mean, it sounds like there's huge benefit, but of course there's got to be some sort of cost involved.
There is, and when you compare it against a traditional plan, and I think we'll cover that a little bit later, but the fees are $95 a year for administration fee and 10% of deposit. So what are you going to get for that money? You're getting the third-party administrator is going to be doing what's called the adjudication. So they're going to go through the entire process to validate all the claims, make sure the claims are not submitted more than once. They'll do some tax filing with CRA for you, and by using a third-party administrator, really, the employer doesn't have anything to do with the plan. It kind of goes on autopilot. Once the claims get submitted, the employees go, what is it and how do I use it? And once they understand it, the employer really doesn't have to do anything. So for the $95 a year, it's really a very low cost plan.
Well, now I'm a business owner. Do I have to provide this benefit to all of my employees?
No, actually, it's interesting. These plans can be set up for one-person companies. They can be set up for multiple employees as well, too. But the employer really can decide who gets the plan. If you've got managers or administrators or laborers, you can really determine who gets it and who doesn't. So it's a lot of control.
Well, I like a lot of control, but do the employees all have to get the same benefit amount?
No, well, the employer, and this is what's different from a traditional plan, is that the employer can set up an annual budget. So if an employee, let's say they're a manager, he decides to give them $2,000 a year. That employee can usually take that $2,000 and spend it any way they want. So it's really a customized program, so they can spend it on, prescription eyeglasses or dental drugs or whatever they want. But the only rules that the Canada Revenue Agency has is that the employee class, or like I said, managers or laborers, all have to get the same amount. So if you've got 5 people who work in administration, all 5 have to get the same amount, and they have to all participate. But what's interesting is that you can create as many employee classes really as you want. So you're not restricted by the actual title of the person. You can say that they're managers or they're executives or whatever the case may be.
You said I can spend the money on whatever I want, but does this cover my employees' family members as well?
Absolutely. So spouses are covered. Children are covered up to age 25, provided they're in post-secondary education. Without that, it's age 18. What's also interesting is that if you have what's considered a financially dependent, someone who's financially dependent on you for care and medical coverage or care as well too, that can be a senior. If you have a parent that's living with you and you own a business and you're spending money on medical devices, those types of things, you can run all those through your plan, which is really interesting because again, you're using this plan, which is pre-tax corporate dollars, to pay for these types of things.
What happens if my spouse has something like this benefit plan at her job?
Actually, I get that quite a bit. And that happens sometimes when you're setting it for your employees. You're like, do I really need this plan? 3 employees, their spouse have great benefits elsewhere. Regardless of where the other plans are, there's always going to be co-pays, deductibles, and things that won't be covered. People are surprised often to find out that their child's braces are not always covered under those plans, and child's braces can be $5,000, $8,000 plus. So whatever the spouse's plan covers, all those other things can be run through the health spending account, which is great because it allows them to get the full deductions. If they have a 80% dental elsewhere, then that other 20% can be run through the health spending account. So it's really for everybody.
What happens if I don't spend all of the money in the calendar year?
There is a rollover provision, so incorporated businesses can actually roll the funds over indefinitely, whereas unincorporated businesses, there's usually about a 2-year window. And sometimes people are a little concerned about that. But, it's all about setting the plan up properly at the very beginning. We don't overfund it too much. We think, the average Canadian family will spend about $2,000 a year on healthcare. So, saying that, plus there's limitations on the unincorporated as well too. So I've never seen a situation where someone's going to lose money. There's always going to be a warning ahead of time. Actually, I just sent an email to someone the other day saying, your funds are coming up in August. You have to utilize them before then, and get some prescription sunglasses or go have a massage. Those types of things will take care of that excess pretty quickly.
But what happens if I have a very, very high medical spend during a year? How does that affect this? Because my medical expenses are actually more than my allotted funds.
That's a good question as well, too. So if you're contributing, say, $2,000 a year, then all of a sudden you had a bunch of dental and bridge work and it was like $6,000. Well, of course, you've overspent. So what ends up happening is that you'll start the new year. Let's say you've spent the $6,000 and you've got $2,000 in your plan. The first month of the anniversary date, if the employer is paying on a monthly basis, all new funds that are going in are already pre-allocated. So any new deposits that go in are already approved and the funds come back to you. So a lot of times for business owners, when they're not sure about how much should I put into this plan, that kind of thing can happen. So that's a quick way of taking care of it. It starts at the beginning of the next year. Now, one provision is that you can only adjust the amount of the contributions on an annual basis on the anniversary date, unless there's a life event, and we can talk about that a little bit too. But if there's a deficit of $4,000, you can simply write a check from your corporation to cover that deficit again. So that's pre-tax money coming out of your company, which is always a good thing. So if you don't have to pay tax on income, in a very legal way that's set up by Revenue Canada, it's just a great way of being able to pay for your health care.
Well, let's talk about that life event. I mean, you opened that door, so I'd like to have both of us walk through it. Let's talk about if there was a major life event, which means that you can make some changes.
Exactly. So if there's a birth of a child or there's an adoption, those types of things, you can simply add that person onto the plan. If there's a marriage or divorce, those types of events can allow for the plans to be altered slightly. But again, it's not something we can I'm going to put in this much money this month and that much money next month. See, that's where CRA will start to have a problem with these plans. That's why we use third-party administrators, because we can kind of set them up for the year, and then they're approved by Revenue Canada. You have to follow the guidelines that Revenue Canada sets, and once you start kind of trying to color outside the lines, that's when the problems start. So the plans are very structured in a way that will never happen. So it's just a matter of kind of playing by the rules.
I'm going to put you on the spot here because you've said a couple of times so far in the podcast that you can really spend the funds on just about anything, but there has to be guidelines. Can you tell us a little bit about those guidelines, please?
Sure, there are changes along the way as well too. At one point, in Ontario, for example, you were allowed to go to a naturopathic doctor if they prescribed vitamins and supplements for you. That was all covered under the plan. Revenue Canada has come back and said that that's no longer covered. There was a time where chiropractic care was covered under OHIP. That's no longer covered, but you can cover it under the health spending account. So really, as long as it's a tax deductible or a medical expense under CRA rules, it's covered, and it has to be an authorized medical practitioner, and those things are covered as well too. So there's a wide array. Most people will spend their money on prescription drugs, dental, but there's also paramedical services such as chiropractic care, physiotherapy, those types of things. All those things are covered.
What happens if one of my employee quits or I have to fire them? How does this affect them specifically and their family?
And it's a big concern for some people, but that's where we kind of start the plans, and we'll say, well, we'll put $1,000 out. The money does stay with the employee, so that's something that we have to bear in mind. That we don't want to create a budget too high too quickly, but it does stay with the employee. So even if they are terminated, they can continue to file claims against that money until it's been used up.
All right. So let's say I want to add some features. When can that happen? How can that happen? Let's talk about adding some features to provide us with a little bit more protection.
So a basic plan will cover pretty much, like I said, all the medical expenses through authorized medical practitioners. And by the way, they don't just necessarily have to be in Canada. If you're going to a specialist in Germany or somewhere in the United States, those types of things, you can actually submit claims for those medical expenses with proper receipts, obviously. But at time of setup of the plan, the basic plan, which is one thing that's really interesting about it, is that there's no concerns or issues with pre-existing medical conditions. So someone who's on prescription medication right now cannot typically buy into a small health and dental plan. They may be able to get coverage under a larger traditional health and dental group benefit plan, but we'll talk about why those aren't necessarily the trend these days. But at time of setup, we can add travel coverage, and travel coverage for a family is actually very reasonable. It's under $10 a month, and that's kind of like an add-on or an option. It covers 30-day trips up to $5 million in coverage. There is another provision, and it's called catastrophic care. So what this does is, and it's under $100 for a family of four per month, and it does require some medical underwriting. But what this does, this covers the unknown, the things that we're not sure about. If there's a major illness which requires expensive medicine, this will cover up to $25,000 per person per year. There's emergency medical or dental, So if someone, we kind of say gets the old hockey puck in the face, so there's $5,000 of emergency dental and semi-private hospital rooms. So all those things can be set up. We usually talk about the base plan first, but it's important to let people know that it is available for them.
Well, Darryl, if I wanted to activate that, how do I activate that?
At time of setup or anniversary, we can add these things. And actually, sometimes we can add them during the year, but usually it's at time of setup. So if you decide that catastrophic care is an option for you, there may be someone in the family that wouldn't be covered for that. So you can have 3 out of 4 people that could be covered for that. And that's where the pre-existing medical conditions will come into play. But for the most part, whatever the person doesn't get on one, they can get coverage on the other one. So it's very, very flexible. And that's the thing when we're talking about traditional plans versus just a health spending account. It's very difficult to design a traditional health and dental plan that accommodates everybody because of the different ages in the workforce these days.
Well, unpack the traditional group benefits plan in this health spending account or health spending account again in regards to unused premiums.
Okay, well, let's talk about setup as well too. I'm licensed to do both plans, and I have both plans out there. A traditional plan is really designed for a company that says, okay, I don't want any problems with the plan. I just want the coverage to be there when somebody needs it, and how much is it going to cost me? And that's great setting it up, but after they've had that plan for 2 or 3 years, and every year they start to get an increase because there's a claims experience that's done by the insurance companies, and they have a certain profit margin that they have to make. So at the end of the year, if you've put in $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a month, at the end of the year, if your claims are actually kind of over the mark where they're projected to be, you're going to see a rate increase, and there's nothing you can do about it. And once somebody's on the plan, let's say someone has a major medical issue and their medications are very expensive, you really can't just stop the plan because there's potential lawsuits involved. So with a traditional plan, let's say you put in $40,000 of premium, at the end of the year, let's say you've got great claims experience, at the end of the year, the excess premium is really just absorbed by the insurance company. It kind of sits on their books. However, with a health spending account, any unused funds are simply rolled over for the following year. And it makes it a lot easier for business owners to really set these up because there's no real surprise at the end of the year. If you've given your employee $2,000, that's what they get. Mm-hmm. So how they choose to spend it, it's up to them. Yeah.
Well, you've been talking about this. Let's start to wind the podcast down a little bit, and let's talk about some of the main benefits of doing a plan like this.
Sure. Now, a small business owner, in today's environment, especially in the blue-collar world, it's very competitive. I talk to people who own construction companies, and you name it. They're all trying to find more employees. So these types of plans are very affordable for them, but they also help to attract new employees, but also retain their existing employees so they're not going to get poached by their competitors. So that's an important feature. In addition, they're tax deductible to the company, and they're a non-taxable benefit to the employee, so it's kind of a win on both sides. The big thing is employees get to spend the benefit the way they want to. Some will be married with kids, and it's always important to have coverage in place for that. Some won't, but they can, like I said, they can go to massage every week if that's what they wanted to do. Employees can set a fixed amount, so that there's no rate increases at the end of the year for the employer. No pre-existing medical conditions. And, there's actually a trend in Canada right now where we're going for private medical. We're going for private doctor firms. There's a place in Toronto, for example, it's called MedCan. And you can go in there in the morning. You can have a complete health assessment done. You can meet with different doctors. You can have a treatment plan created for you all in one day. You pay for that, but you can run these types of things through the health spending account if you need certain medical treatments or tests that need to be done, and there's a 6 to 9 month waiting period. You don't want to wait. This is going to be on your mind for 6 to 9 months. Simply use your health spending account to pay for these types of things. So it's important that these options are available for people, and it's really, in a way, I can't see why a business owner wouldn't want one of these because they do so much for the employer and the employees.
Well, this sounds absolutely awesome, but there has to be a catch here. What doesn't this cover?
Well, the plans are set. Here's your budget. Go spend the money. It's not like a traditional health and dental plan, for example, a group benefits plan may have things built into it like life insurance, disability coverage, and critical illness. So these plans do not have that. These are basically you go pay for a medical service, dental, whatever, and you get reimbursed for it. But they don't have those other insurance provisions in there.
Gotcha. Is it possible to actually outgrow this plan? I mean, if your business is growing and you're retaining great employees and business is just booming, what are their alternatives?
Well, for a lot of business owners, it depends on the size of the company. This might be the plan for them that they're going to have forever. But as things start to grow and people are requesting more things like disability coverage, there is actually between a health spending account and a traditional health and dental plan, there's kind of a midpoint, so a hybrid plan. So what we do is we use the premiums on a regular basis to fund things that we can kind of calculate and know that there'll be expenses for. That would be dental, paramedical services, those types of things. then we can actually insure the things that we cannot predict or we're unsure of, which is the life insurance and the disability coverage and long-term care. So those are the kind of the benefits of having the best of both worlds. Now, on an annual basis, if someone has a traditional plan and they're paying $25,000 a year in premium, we put a hybrid plan in there. What we'll do first year is we'll actually mirror the two plans. So you'll have the same benefits at the same price. But at the end of the year, if you have a positive claims experience with the new plan, you will actually have a surplus. And that surplus actually can be refunded back to the company, or it can be left on deposit, and we can reduce the amount of premiums going forward. And if there's an increase due to the insurance side of things, then that's where the insurance kind of kicks in. So we're not concerned about it for most health and dental plans. The regular stuff is what really causes the increases, which is the prescription drugs and dental.
Well, Darryl, thank you so much for all of this education today. This has been eye-opening and I think a great opportunity for people to really take a better look at how they're providing these benefits to their employees.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Well, we hope you enjoyed today's show, and please remember that the topics covered here today are for information purposes only. Please discuss these ideas with professional advisors before making any changes to your situation. To learn more about Darryl Smith and the Blue Wealth Business Succession Program, please visit us at synergylife.ca. From the website, you can download a free yet informative workbook, 10 Tips to Maximize Blue Collar Wealth. You can also book a 20-minute no-obligation consultation with Darryl, asking any questions you might have. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.